The PorscheSport Podcast, powered by Porsche Centre Leeds. Test drive the new Porsche Taycan and experience soul electrified. For more information, visit www.PorscheSport.com.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the PorscheSport Podcast, because joining myself and Kat Impey today are two Porsche racing legends. Mr. Pat Long over in California and Jörg Bergmeister in Germany. Now, these two men had, they must have been the fear of all of their competitors at the time. 84 races together, 25 wins, 40 podiums. And in terms of the big races, winner at the Rolex 24-hour at Daytona, twice winner at the Sebring 12-hour, twice winner at Petit Le Mans, one-time winner of the Le Mans 24-hour, and 3 times LMS Champions. I had to write all them down. I couldn't remember that, guys. Welcome to the show. It's been quite a career for you guys together.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
My pleasure. Now, in the early, of course, it's about just over 16 years since you guys first drove together, but one of the earliest races was Le Mans in 2004, where you guys won straight out the gate. Tell us a bit about that experience.
Patrick, why don't you start?
For myself, it was my first year as a works driver for Porsche. I had 1 year of cup racing under my belt in Europe, and to get the call about a week before the pre-test that I was going to Le Mans for my first time, and also joining the Peterson White Lightning crew and Sascha Maassen and Jörg Bergmeister. I guess naivety helped me. I was so young and probably overconfident that it was like, yeah, no problem, and just jumped on a plane, new team, new teammates, and certainly as a rookie, I was the liability in one of the lead efforts for Porsche and one of the favorites for the class victory. And I remember coming out of the pre-test after a day on the track and maybe a handful of laps, 20, 30 laps, some 10 seconds off the pace, and thinking to myself, I have some work to do here to find my pace. I kept it clean and sort of erased a little bit of the liability, I think, out of some of the team members' minds. But naturally in the race, I found the pace, but was a little more of a liability. So I sort of switched my responsibilities, or I guess what people were expecting of me. But all in all, it was a dream result. And for me to learn under Jörg and Sascha was unbelievable. But I also remember that was my first race with Stefan Pfeiffer, who we'll probably come back to and talking about as an engineer for us in many teams together. But Jörg, you probably have a much different perspective. I'll leave you with one more thought, which was in the final stint, the way that the race had unfolded. We were in a big battle with the Felbermayr German entry with Romain and Ortelli. And I decided to hold my hand up and say, guys, you need to put one of the veterans in for that final stint, because I'm so fatigued mentally. I don't think I can handle the pressure. So I think Sascha liked that I wasn't too proud to try and finish it out. And I think Jörg took it to the checkered. But Jörg, you have a better memory than me.
No, definitely not. The only thing that really stands out for me for the entire race and the entire race weekend was I had a bike crash like a week before, and quite some road rash. So initially, when I had the crash the week before, I thought, oh, that's it for Le Mans this year. But luckily, with the help of the Porsche doctors, and our Porsche doctor at the time was also really involved into cycling. So he knew all the tricks from the Tour de France guys on how to treat the road rash the best. And luckily, it hurt quite a lot, but it was all worth it when you take the check at first. So.
Yeah, in typical Jörg fashion, he's saying that he had a little bike crash, but I mean, tell us, I think you got cleared out by a car, slid across the hood of the car, and was literally head to toe scab and hobbling around. It wasn't not a small incident.
Yeah, it was quite a good one, I'd say. I smashed the windscreen with my helmet. Luckily, I was wearing a helmet, and then slid off the hood, and from the hood straight over the asphalt. Wasn't the most comfortable one I had.
Wow, that's not the ideal preparation, is it? No. And now this is the question. Obviously, you guys you'd had one race together before that at Daytona, I think, from my notes. But what were your first impressions of one another? Obviously, you're at two slightly different stages of your career. What were your first impressions?
Well, when I first met Patrick was at the junior test for the Porsche junior team, and apparently it was the first time he got into a Porsche and was really doing well. At some point, one of our engineers, Roland Kusmal, told me to follow him a bit and put a bit of pressure on him to see how he reacts. And it was in Leipzig at the Porsche track, and he did a really good job. So I was pleasantly surprised for someone with little to no experience in a sports car to do such a good job.
And Pat?
I guess from the first day I met Jörg until that first time at Le Mans, he was putting me under pressure. So that would be a good summary of, Jörg is a competitor through and through. So he's like a tall, gentle giant and true gentleman. But when it comes to competition, he comes from a family of champions, and you know that you need to get up to pace and keep the car clean. And we have a lot of fun in between the races. But certainly when the engine starts up, it was an unbelievable learning experience for me all the way through our career together. And it started right off the bat there in Leipzig, and then of course at Daytona. That was I remember it being a pretty fun debut for me, joining the previous year before overall winning driver lineup with Timo and Kevin and Jörg, and I think they swapped a couple of drivers. But Le Mans was a wild one. It was such an intense battle, and in that era, I mean, I'm talking like an old person at a bar, but in that era, we started practice with an H pattern synchro gearbox. We ended with this extra special sequential gearbox for the race, which was, we might have been the only car with that gearbox. So it was a very sort of influential time in GT3 RSR era. And it was still a time at Le Mans where you had adversity and you had mechanical failures and you were in the pits for a lap or two or three, and then you still could battle back and race for a victory. So a much different era, a much different period in Le Mans racing, but an awesome one in its own right, because you still had to take care of the car and you still had that never give up attitude, where in this day and age, you drive qualifying laps all the way through, and if you have one little hiccup or miss one little safety car period, you're pretty much out of contention for a podium.
Sorry, I was going to ask, how Pat, did you deal with the pressure? So coming in, you've got experienced teammates around you, you've got Porsche, that pressure. How did you prepare and deal with that, really?
There were a couple aspects to it. One was just being young and too inexperienced to really understand everything that was on the line through and through. That ignorance is bliss, always helps. The other part of it was just remaining very objective in trying to prepare. I mean, in that era, we didn't have iRacing or simulation. There were no tracks for Le Mans. So at that point, it was really every lap counted, and you had to work the data and really trust your teammates. And I mean, coming back to Jörg and Sasha, you couldn't hope for two more prepared professional leaders who had an answer to every question. And for Sasha, he was always sort of a more father figure, big picture guy. And Jörg, I could go to on the technical side, how to squeak out an extra tenth here or there with use of curbs, or why we were tuning the differential or the high speed versus the low speed compression. And so I really had a lot of great mentors around me. Dale White was a leader at that team who really bred an all-in perspective. Every single person on the team was important and part of the links of the chain. And then Stefan Pfeiffer, although German, spent a lot of time in Australia, just a very personable guy and somebody, again, who was super intense, but made you feel welcome and made you feel as a part of the team. And then to cap it off, another name drop would be Roland Kusmal. He was our engineer that race. Roland coming from Porsche and sort of liaising for that weekend. And I mean, what a treat. Roland, his name and his accomplishments are too long for this interview, but everything from Dakar to Le Mans to developing street cars and race cars in Weissach. I mean, there's not a more legendary race engineer, in my opinion. So it was an amazing experience for me, and one where you just had all of those different resources around you, and there was always someone there to kind of pick up the pieces for the rookie from California.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for yourself then, Jörg, having a rookie there, is it easy to have a rookie there and like create that relationship straight away, take them under your wing and look after them to a point?
I'm going to be honest, there was no taking under the wing. I threw him in the deep end and he just had to swim. No, as Patrick said, obviously at the end he had to perform and he did a really good job. And yeah, tips here and there, but the driving he had to do himself, and that's what he did. And that's how we could win the race. It's a team effort. And that's one thing about White Lightning. That team was there. White, as Patrick said, was really a small team. Definitely not a big factory effort, but a little family, and everybody trusted each other. And I think that's why we were so successful with them.
Yeah.
Indeed, of course, that was the first LMS Championship in 2005 together, but that was looking closely through that year. In fact, I was watching the first ever race of the RS Spider the other day, and you guys winning at the last moment in the dark at Laguna for Peterson White Lightning. In the early stages of that year, Romain and Timo, they must have been a real pain in the backside at the start of that season. But how did you guys turn it around together? Because it seems like you won the last 4 races. What sort of clicked? What changed in your partnership over that year?
Actually, it was a bit more detail in that. It was not just so Romain and Timo were obviously driving for the factory supported team was Alex Job.
Okay.
We were with a little privateer team. And after Le Mans, for Le Mans, we got a different ECU. For shifting, had better traction control and stuff like that, which we were supposed to return after Le Mans, but we kept it.
Brilliant.
So from that point on, we had the same tools, and I think that's why we had much better chances for the second part of the season and then won the championship.
So it was as simple as having some new toys, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly didn't remember that part. I probably that information was kept privy to those who needed to know or had a hand in it. But I think we just executed. We weren't anything but a united group of young males from the West Coast, and we just we worked hard. We played hard. We were the spoilers. Jörg had a bone to pick with the factory after a tough year before, and he was motivated. He brought me along. I remember Lucas started with us. Lucas Luhr started with us at Sebring, and we had a damper go down in the 12-hour and soldiered on with no damping. And they were a Baja Desert team and guys that prepped and prepared in the hotel parking lot before the next race. And they just taught us about, again, that bond and that trust and the ability of having such a small group where everybody had one another's back. There was no subgroups, whether they were a subcontractor that was coming over to contribute for the weekend or they were a full-time member of the team. There was an amazing amount of team spirit. And I think that pulled us through some tough weekends and also maybe some other weekends where there was a more favored car, but they tripped up on trying to outperform one another inside the team or some other aspect of politics that really helped us.
Wow. And did that must have been quite a cool experience, obviously being effectively backed by by Porsche, being Porsche guys, but then also being able to race for a proper small knit group of racers. That must have been quite a nice compromise, I guess.
Patrick?
Yeah, for me, I think it's the best of both worlds. You nailed it on the head, to have the resources and the infrastructure behind you, but maybe not all the pressure and expectation that the main program has. And we really found a bond between the two of us. On paper, we're about as opposite as they come from every aspect of where you grew up and how you act and behave and apply yourself. And I was kind of just more of the guy learning on the job, and Jörg had a much more experienced background. And I think that there were times where I sort of went out and really didn't understand a lot of what was going on behind the scenes. And that allowed me to just focus on keeping the car on the track and not getting caught up in who might have been saying what, or who might have been looking at what, as far as data or results. It was a very refreshing time in my career, and it was very pure. It was just about getting out there and having a good time. And I mean, Jörg and I think we spent most of our time at dinner that year. You know, it was like leave early, come late, and just socialize and be kids traveling North America, and knowing that we had a great group behind us, and the car was always going to be dialed when we showed up to the track.
Well, that comes neatly on to one of my questions. I'm sure Kat has some follow-ups as well. Is that how important? Obviously, when you're in the car, it's not like a rally team where you have a co-driver and a driver, and one's reading the pace notes out. You're in the car on your own. But how important is it, from guys that have been there and done it? How important is it, that chemistry between you and your co-driver? Is it as important as, or how important would you say that it is?
For me, it's definitely one of the key points. As we say, it's a team sport, and therefore the mix, the chemistry between the drivers is really important. Not only on the direction you take on setup, but I mean, you all heard the stories about teammates that didn't like each other, swapping the brake bias from one to the other, trying to mess with your teammates, and that's the least thing you need in endurance racing. So it's really the effort. It needs to be a team effort, and then at the end, when the results are good, everybody will be happy. And I think Patrick understood quickly after coming from single seaters that's a different game, and he did a very good job. And overall, I think, as I said, it's a team sport, and therefore one focus, and that's the top step of the podium.
And do you ever have a say on who your teammates are? Like, so is it completely left up to the team to say, right, you're going with so-and-so and that's happening? Or do you guys ever get a say in that?
No, well, it depends obviously on the situation. But after the first success that Patrick and I had together, we obviously had a say in what we wanted to do, and that we would like to stay together. At some point, Patrick decided he wants to go to the RS Spider, which was never an option for me because I'm just a little too tall for that car. And after that program was done, I gladly took him back as a teammate again.
So, Jörg, is that why you left single seaters, because of your height? Because you're what, 6'4"?
6'4". Yeah, definitely. There was a time I was supposed to test an F3000, but I just couldn't fit in the car, and then definitely made the final decision to swap to sports cars. And to say I never regretted it was definitely the right call to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So had you both had aspirations for Formula One, before that point, before sports cars, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think every kid, and looking at my nephew now, who's in karting now, every kid that's in karting dreams of F1. But for me, as I said, at some point I had to realize I'm just a little too tall.
Yeah.
And Pat, you had a kind of similar experience, didn't you, with Red Bull? It was kind of, there was a program at the time to get drivers over from the US, and then that indirectly led to Porsche. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. In 2002, Formula One was gaining a lot of momentum with the USGP at Indianapolis, and sort of a long dry spell since I think it was Michael in 93 when Michael Andretti drove for McLaren, and that didn't go that well either. So it was a search for an American in Formula One. I had been living in the UK and racing in Formula Renault, a couple of seasons of British Formula Ford in 2000 and 2001. And so I was very much inside the circle of single seaters and that mindset. And I was going over to Jaguar at the time, and Bobby Rahal was leading the team there in Milton Keynes. And so definitely sort of felt like Red Bull was the calling and the one chance that I had been looking for in those 6-7 years living in Europe and trying to cut my teeth with the best European karters and single seater drivers. And it didn't really work out for me program wise. I loved everything that I learned with them, and the mentality when Helmut Marko showed up to Paul Ricard that day to make his final selections on who his 4 candidates were going to be. It had been going well up to that point, and I didn't quite hit my marks in the final run with BSR in the Formula 3 car, and he was clearly pretty focused on Scott's speed, and it worked out for Scott and for Red Bull. But luckily, Porsche was there. Danny Sullivan, who had a driving career in part with Porsche, had kept in touch with Uwe Bredel, who was head of the Porsche Junior team and the Super Cup at that time. And he had invited them along because they had sort of toyed with the idea of an American inside of an American sponsored UPS Junior team. And they figured this might be a place to kind of come poach a driver. The Austrians had done all the hard work and scraped and combed for all the best American candidates. And they figured they could swoop in, stay in the background and forge a few relationships. And luckily, I had spent a little time with Uwe and Helmut Greiner, and they gave me a call on Monday. I remember I had a raging headache because when we got the note that we hadn't been chosen for the Final Four, Phil Giebler, another Californian, and I, we hitched a ride to Monaco, which wasn't too far from Paul Ricard, and gathered our wits about us at the bar with Nico Rosberg, and we were dancing the night away, and even had some Monte Carlo police involved with the end of the night, and woke up with a pretty bad hangover. And Porsche had called and said, "Don't get on a plane to California yet. Come over to Weissach and let us show you around there, and then we'll ship you up to Leipzig to jump into a 911 and see what you think about a tin top." So yeah, strange how fate works, but 18 years later, I wouldn't trade it for anything. So very fortunate.
Wow.
You're very relieved, are you, to it sounds awful to say dodge the bullet of Red Bull, but there's a lot of focus on how Red Bull treat their drivers, and certainly their junior drivers, especially you see people like Alex Albon and others at the moment. They seem to invest a lot into people, but it seems to be one size fits all, and if you don't cut it and the way they want you to cut it, that's it. And of course, people like Porsche, you can have a very long career with Porsche, and hugely successful career. So do you feel, with hindsight now, kind of relieved that it actually worked out that way?
I just feel positive for the opportunities. It sounds cliche or a little safe to say, but without the opportunity of what Red Bull did and the amount of money they put up for that program, I wouldn't have had a chance to meet the people at Porsche. I have fit into the culture or the expectation of Formula One in general, or the Red Bull driver program? Probably not. I needed people around me who had my back and really gave me the time to develop. I wasn't quite one of those ultimate go out and in the first 3 laps go as quick as I'm going to go all weekend. And so regardless if it was Red Bull or Ferrari or anybody else, it's not my style of driving. It's not single seaters and high downforce wasn't really my calling. I feel like when the grip is low and the tires are soft, then you really have to kind of think your way through a stint. I can provide more value to a team versus just the ultimate digital pace of high downforce and resilient tires. So in the end, I was aiming and striving for as high as I could get in the motorsport ladder. And I figured if I looked where the opportunity existed, that would better my chances because I didn't have the funding. And so I was just following trends. If Formula One was the hot place to be, I was all about Formula One. If Porsche came calling and it was sports car racing, well, that was going to also be awesome for me. I realized that making a living at this sport from a very young age, my father sort of instilled in my mind that there were no guarantees in motorsport. And so with that, it just fortunate for all the opportunities, because I, again, didn't have the funds to ever get into a Formula 3 car unless someone like Red Bull came forward. So it's interesting to see Red Bull and everything they've done for so many drivers. And I think one of the places they get a bad rap is that they put their name behind so many drivers that, of course, more drivers than not are going to get dropped at a certain point. But yeah, I'll be candid and say that Mr. Marco's style of driver development is very, very cutthroat, and he would probably tell you that as well. So yeah, probably best that I got picked up by some kind, loving Germans when I did.
He had Uncle Jörg to put an arm around your shoulder.
Yeah, Uncle Jörg and Uncle Sasha with a side of Kuzmal and Singer. It's not a bad company to be around there. They were pretty allowing.
I can imagine. And on the subject of cars, Pat, obviously went from the single seaters, and with driving for Porsche, you guys, even just the cars you drove together, you drove all different kinds of 911, the hybrid 911 GT3, which is a really cool project as well. I mean, for both of you, and then of course a brief flirtation with the Ruby Tuesdays Daytona prototype as well. Tell us about what have been some of your highlights of the cars that you've raced with Porsche.
Yeah, for me, definitely, as you said, the GT3R hybrid was kind of my baby. Was something completely new, and I'd say I was the main development driver for that car. And it was just cool to really bring ideas into the program, and those ideas become reality later on. It was, again, a very small team, just like probably 6-7 people that were involved on the engineering side. Owen Hayes, which was an engineer for Patrick and myself for quite some time as well. Full-on racer, flat out, always pushing for the maximum. So I really enjoyed working with him on that program, and it was just a special car. Fortunately, didn't have the most luck, especially not at the Nürburgring. Patrick and I won in Zhuhai, which was the perfect track for the car because it was one hairpin after the other. So I think we even finished P4 overall ahead of a lot of LMP2s. So it was quite impressive on that track. The acceleration out of those hairpins was special. It was my coolest project, I'd say. And then obviously the later cars, the RSRs, a lot of fun to drive, which I will be enjoying next week again in Bahrain. I got another call to jump in again, and so retirement is been cut short.
I like the sound of your retirement. I want some of that for my retirement. Racing Porsches. Pat, how about you? What have some of the highlights been behind the wheel?
There's too many to list. I think every time, I've jumped with Jörg, I've always learned technically. He gets so involved with the engineers, and that was a great immersion for me. It's a lot easier and more enjoyable to learn kind of through osmosis and passive observation versus reading about it or watching YouTube videos. But I can tell you some stories about a car that I don't love that we shared for a season, and that was that Daytona prototype you mentioned. I'll start with the fit. So without a sliding seat for somebody of average height, as I would say, 5'8", that is the U.S. average male height. Jörg is a very a lengthy lad, but luckily our hips are about the same width, so the seat always fit in the width, but in the length we had a little different inseam, and so. Sorry, with the Daytona prototype, we had to make a seat insert that could get me to reach the pedals as they didn't move either, but the steering didn't go forward or back. So essentially I was laying down in the car to reach the pedals, but in order to get myself away from the steering wheel, because if I just pushed myself forward, I would literally be eating the steering wheel. So it was the most awkward driving position of my career and pretty miserable, but I ended up figuring that part out, and it just was a turbulent season. We chased that car. It started with so much promise the year before at Daytona, where we basically unlapped ourselves from being 8 laps down to almost win the race. And a year and a half later, when we dragged Jörg into the program, we couldn't find consistency. We couldn't find pace, and the competition was so high. There was 20 cars that could win. What's that?
It was just me.
Yeah. Oh,
I agree. That was probably also my least favorite car to drive.
Yeah, it was a pretty evil car. It had a very a peaky 4-liter engine. It had hard Hoosier tires, or whatever we were running at that time, whatever they were branded, they were steel belted Hoosiers. And the car just was snappy. It was hard to keep on pace. And I remember after 2 or 3 races of chasing a lack of performance, I think we found a cracked bell housing. There was just no rigidity the way that the engine butted up to the space frame, the tube frame of the prototype. So that one was a challenge, but through it all, we still won some races. I remember Jörg, we finished under yellow at Laguna, and we pulled a fast one on the fuel strategy, and we were so tight on fuel that there was no way we were going to make it without a final yellow at the last sort of 10 minutes of the race. And it finished under yellow, but we almost ran out of fuel on the last lap under yellow. I think you coasted, Jörg, from the corkscrew all the way to turn 11, and then just had enough fuel to the pace car was pulling away from us. That's the way I remember it. And Jörg was sort of like trying to keep the field behind us as we got across the line at 5 miles an hour. So no, good memories within a tough year. But yeah, certainly the hybrid was an amazing memory. And then just the RSR domination that we had with Flying Lizard. What another group to be involved with. An amazing, sort of a similar family principle, but with much more resources, and the scale of the team was probably 3x of what we had at Peterson, but the vibe was still the same, and the results were equally as impressive. So yeah, good memories there.
You mentioned Owen Hayes. I spoke with him a few weeks ago. I was interviewing him for a book project that I'm doing, and he told me a lot about the preparation that went into Porsche's official effort when Grand Dam and ALMS merged together, and Porsche came back with a full kind of factory effort, and how much effort he put in personally. I know you guys have both been quite involved in that process. Could you tell our viewers a little bit about what that was like, getting a Porsche full factory branded effort ready to go back into what we now know as IMSA, and then of course the sister car winning at Daytona, and then you guys winning at Sebring straight away. What was that whole journey like?
Patrick, go ahead. What was your program?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. So it was a clean sheet of paper in 2013. At the end of 2012, Flying Lizard decided that the run with the RSRs was not to continue, and so there was sort of a bye year in 13, and we needed to plan for a rumored factory program starting in 14. But we also needed to understand who our prospects of teams were. And we had thought we had found the perfect team, who was a private team and well-funded, and they were going to put us in a single car effort. And that fell apart at the 11th hour. So for the first 3 races, I sort of just hung out and watched it on TV. But I remember Jens Falter, who was head of Porsche Motorsport North America at that point, had brought a file off of his cabinet in his office in Orange County. We were sitting together, and he said, "What do you think about these guys?" And it was Core Autosport, it said on the front of the proposal. And I said, they impressed me in a small amount of time. I think they had only been in the LMPC class for a year or two, but the scale and the professionalism and the presentation and their results right off the bat, I knew there were some people behind that program that were serious. And so we investigated a little further and checked the temperature from their side about adding a Porsche to their LMPC program. And John Bennett, the co-founder, and Morgan Brady both responded very positively to the inquiry. And within a few weeks, we were announcing the program at the New York Auto Show, and we went into testing that Monday after the Sebring 12-hour. And I could tell. I mean, it was. I tell the story at 9 a.m. The track went green on Monday, and at 9:01 we had just completed our first lap. I mean, we were 30 seconds early out for the first lap, and Morgan Brady, who co-founded the team and was really the general manager and still is, he just was a Formula One or a factory Porsche mindset from the beginning. And as an American, that really resonated well with me. And the program was amazing. Fast forward to your question of winning the first 2 major classics in 2014 as Core Autosport and the factory RSR program with 2 cars. Daytona was a big disappointment for us in the 912 car with Michael Christensen, Jörg, myself. We were leading and felt that we had good pace to at least battle our sister cars first race out. There was certainly some inter-team rivalry already forming, and we unfortunately lost our engine some few hours to go in the race. But my memories of Sebring is that we had formed an alliance quickly, the three of us drivers and our engineer David Brown, who had an amazing career with Williams in Formula One and everything since then. And we were practicing driver changes. It was still dark on race morning. We were there early. The other team was sort of just getting in, and we were already suited and booted, and just we were there to win. We kept saying that all weekend, and we executed in the race, and that was an amazing feat. And the rest of the season was turbulent, but a great memory of a program that started again with just Jens pulling that folder off of his metal filing cabinet and asking me what do we think about these guys,
Jörg?
Yeah, not much more to add. I was just the third spacer for those races because it was Patrick's and Michael's full-time ride, and I was focusing on WEC at the time. Also with the factory team in Manthey. No, but as Patrick said, the level right from the beginning of the team was very impressive. Really high professionalism, and the success they've shown over the years, I think, just backs that up.
Is it hard for you guys sometimes to work as a team? Because you're naturally obviously very competitive. Do you ever get that problem where you kind of want to outdo each other and sometimes have to know when to rein it in and bring the car home? Because obviously you all want to be the best, right? You're racing drivers. So is there ever that kind of battle with endurance racing of knowing when to sort of rein it in a little bit and make sure you're driving as quick as you can without taking those risks of trying to get, the quickest lap overall or the quickest stint?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, you always want to be the quickest, as you said. But it's a give and take at some point. When you're in a position where you really have to push, obviously you're going flat out without risking too much. But when you're already in the lead and everything is easy, then if you throw the car away, then I think you're better looking for a job afterwards.
Yeah.
Porsche wouldn't like that. And therefore, as I said earlier, we're all racing drivers, and we're competing. But at the end, the main goal is winning the race. And I think Patrick is. That's why we got along so well, because we always had the bigger focus, not on our lap times, but on the big picture.
Yeah. Makes sense. So how? So we're talking about preparation and things. Do you guys do iRacing and stuff now? Do you, obviously now that's part of it, and you see a lot of simulator work in Formula One and things. Is that the same for you guys, or do you stay clear of it?
I'm too old.
Jörg's too competitive. I think the thought of a 14-year-old signing on and kicking his butt probably keeps him away. That or the cost of the machines, it gets pretty expensive quick as well.
Yeah.
I'm dumb enough to take the bait and to join some races, and I don't know if I finished on the lead lap of any of the races in IMSA this year when we were in the pandemic, but I do think that it's an amazing platform, not only to learn racetracks and to understand racecraft, but just that emotional and mental outlet in the off season, the buildup of preparation for the race, the start, the execution of strategy. There are so many things that really do translate one-to-one. But the driving dynamics, the conditions, the driving style, it's still not there in my opinion. It's in theory, the tire model works like a racing car, and in theory, the motion simulators give you the feedback of what your race car does, but it's a different sport, and therefore, like any sport, the amount of hours you spend on something is really the only way to become an expert. So when you see very, very gifted racing drivers that are amazing sim racers, I think they're the first ones to tell you that their time investment in sim racing is similar to their real job, and that's amazing that they have a marriage that allows that. They clearly don't have kids that are interested in them, nor any other hobbies, but I give them a lot of respect for what they do, and they've certainly taught me a lot. But in seriousness, I have a 5-year-old son, and I throw him on the sim, and it's amazing to watch the intuitive reaction to being in an off-road truck and closed course, and seeing opposite lock being put in, and for somebody to be able to train that in a safe environment at 5 years old and not cost me any money in tires, it's an amazing thing.
At that point, Pat, are you thinking, "Uh-oh, we're in trouble here. I can see where this is going"?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds very pessimistic and brutal, but I would say that he probably has a better future making a 6-figure living as an esports driver than he does his odds of making it as a real racing driver. So it doesn't bug me too much. It's not as difficult as sitting in Sunday night traffic coming back from a kart race and having to be at school on Monday morning. I mean, that's how Jörg and I grew up. So I love seeing him enjoy driving in his own way, but it's not very serious in my household. It's really just experiencing what Dad does and doing what he wants to do. So we have fun with karting and with esports and also with two-wheel experience. And so each one of them is a fun journey to watch the youth in. But, Jörg can tell you some stories about serious karting from a youth standpoint.
Well, not with me, but my nephew is actually flat out karting. Unfortunately, nowadays he's a little too tall already, and he's an okay. For the past, I don't know, he got in the go-kart first time when he was 2.5, wow. And since then has been flat out. Next year, shifter karts. So,
really, yeah.
Fourth generation in racing for the Bergmeister family.
Wow. And Jörg, you've got an interesting background with karting. Do I understand it correctly that you used to go and practice with a certain Michael Schumacher?
Yeah, I guess that's fair to say. Michael worked for my dad in our Audi and Volkswagen dealership. So on the Mondays when the go-kart track usually is closed in Kerpen, we went there to go testing, and he taught my brother and myself quite a lot of tricks in karting. And my dad tried to help him in his early stages in his career. He supported him in Formula König and Formula Ford, and then made some introductions to Formula 3 teams. And I think for him it worked out well as well.
And did your father ever find out about the journey back from the kart track in the old truck on the Autobahn?
Michael was a bit worried about it. The story is we have a cool Autobahn exit going to our place. It's right, left, right, and he cut a bit too much and hit the grass on the inside, and then managed to spin the truck in between the guardrails. Luckily didn't touch anything. I was sitting in the back of the truck in the go-kart and was just wondering what's going on. And he tried to convince us that we shouldn't tell our dad anything. Yeah, it's flat out.
Now, just a last couple of questions for you guys, because we've taken up quite a lot of your time. Now, of course, you both get occasional experiences with classic Porsches, and Porsche really, for me, have this incredible heritage in motor racing, and it's been with the company since day one. And the catalogue of cars to choose from are just endless. I mean, if you guys had to go back in time and take on a classic race together in a Porsche, what do you think it would be?
Ooh, that's interesting. I think maybe one of the Targas would be wild to just understand Targa Florio, for instance, and running almost in that Isle of Man vibe of right up against the curbs and the pubs and just the spectacle and the era of the cars. I find myself jumping into classic cars and just being in love with the romanticism of how much feedback you get from the car and how close the edge really is in anything that you do, any input that you do. You're like, oh, well, there's the edge right there. I didn't have to work too hard to find it. And so that part of it I absolutely love. And it's been fun to get to sample some of Porsche's amazing past and history in motorsport. And it's wild to compare and understand that a 67 911R versus a modern 992 911, there's parallels in the driving style, even sometimes in acceleration points or braking zones. And it's wild to think about that. But when you think about how much slower you were going in 67, how much lighter the car was, everything scales in certain racetracks very similar, which is a lot of fun. But there's plenty of differences, but there are still similarities that much 60 years later.
Wow, Jörg, how about you? What would the choice be?
So many cool cars to pick from, but maybe at some point in, I don't know, another 20 years, we should do Le Mans in the 2004 car again to really experience what we had to go through back in the days. Because if you look at it, how much better the cars get from model to model is really impressive. One side is the car, and also the tires are obviously a big factor as well. But as Patrick said, back in the days in 04, you still had to really watch out for the car and be a bit gentle. And nowadays it's just flat out. You hit every curb as hard as you can, and it just has to last. And I think it would be a cool experience to go back in another 20 years and to drive a car from that era again.
Well, I'm sure you won't be short of invitations. I'm sure. Where is the car now? Do you know who the car belongs to?
Patrick, do you know?
That car, I believe, is owned by Carlos de Quesada in Tampa, Florida. Yes. I think that one of the cars, the second car we had, went to a collection in Colorado. And I'm still in touch with that owner. He likes to remain anonymous, but the car that won all the races, I remember. I think that might have been the first race for that car at Le Mans. They might have run it at Sebring with their regular drivers, but it had been welded back together so many times after running multiple 24-hour races, multiple Sebrings, 2 full seasons in ALMS. I mean, you couldn't give that car away at the end of the championship that day. I think it was at Laguna Seca in 05 when we finished up the season. I remember Mike Peterson, the owner of the team, saying, I need to find a buyer for this car. And if I remember correctly, it was like $125,000 or something they were looking for on that car. And all of us kind of chuckled, like, who would ever buy this old, tattered, worn out car that Jörg and I have just been thrashing for 2 seasons? And I'm sure that's a seven-figure car these days. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So going forward, what's on the horizon for you guys, for the future? Anything exciting? Any news coming up?
Patrick? Jörg, do you have any vacations planned to the Bahamas or anything? I mean, you're enjoying. I see you're way too relaxed in this after driving career. For me, it's one more race in the championship in IMSA, heading into Sebring. We're second place in the points behind a dual car effort from another manufacturer that's been really the car to beat this year. But similar to our 05 season, we've kind of just been the spoilers, the single car private team, and hope to continue with them next year. Having a lot of fun in my racing these days. My teammate Ryan Harderwick is somebody who is new to the sport, probably 3 or 4 years into GT racing, and just doing a heck of a job. He's so applied and so focused and professional. And then away from that, I'm just working on my little startup brand, Luftgekühlt, playing with vintage 911s on the street and trying to understand what the other side of business really is all about. As racing drivers, like I mentioned, you show up last, you leave first, everything is taken care of. They tell you where to go, what to say, and where to be. And when you understand logistics and you understand team management and everything that it takes to run a business on the back end, it really shifts your perspective. So I feel like I'm kind of in my night school years of racing driver by day and running a brand behind the scenes. And I hope to parlay that into something a little more serious in the future, and also continue my tenure with Porsche Motorsport. I'm really passionate about the Carrera Cup coming to North America for 2021. Carrera Cup is a place that all of us as drivers owe a ton of our success and where we are today. And so been involved there in a lot of the discussions, and hopefully I'll have my hand in that as it builds on this side of the pond.
Excellent. And what about yourself, Jörg? Are you going to be doing any further races, even though you're retired?
Well, next week, as I said, WEC in Bahrain, together with my old team, Project One, as Matteo Cairoli still has chances on winning a championship in a different series. I hopped in for him. And then afterwards, end of the month, probably going to China for 10 days for development drives for Porsche. That's the plan, at least at the moment. We'll see what the situation will be later this month. And then for next year, no plans on racing yet. But a race here and there, as I said, I will always do. But the focus now is on the new job, which is development of the new sports cars, and really enjoying that and looking forward.
Well, that comes quite neatly onto my final question is, I could imagine you guys have got a good choice of company cars. It's a two-part question. What are you guys driving about in just now, and what's been your favorite company car in your time working with Porsche?
Patrick, you start.
I like to tell a story of when Jörg called me in I think about 2010, and he said, we're Porsche factory drivers, so we should be driving in GT3 RSs. And I was like, oh, right. Yeah, good luck with that one. Call up Hartmut and the bosses in Weissach and sell them on that one, Jörg. I'm sure you have great arguments. And sure enough, 3 months later, he came back and he's like, yep, we all get GT3 RSs next year. So I thought that was a pretty amazing display of Jörg politicking the top bosses, and he had great arguments for it, and they signed off on it. But I'm kind of an old man in heart. I drive four-door segment stuff as a company car, and then play on the weekends in crusty old 356s or 911s. I'm enjoying a Macan GTS right now, but there's a Taycan showing up to my door soon, and looking forward to my first electric car. So I tried to have fun with the design on it to make it plenty youthful as I enter into sort of the electrification of my neighborhood, which is mostly soccer bombs in SUVs. So
all the stereotypes. Yeah. Jörg, what are you driving at the moment?
At the moment, Carrera S. 3 weeks ago, I returned my GT3 RS, which was my daily driver. Still crazy enough. And the next car, probably something more sporty, or even more sporty than the Carrera S again. But still enjoying to go quick on the Autobahn.
I say the electrification in Los Angeles is pretty awesome, because we don't go very far. We do a lot of stopping and accelerating, so we get to have a lot of fun with that linear torque, and we get to recharge in all the braking in our traffic on the 101 and the 405. So I am looking forward to that. We had some fun up in Sonoma in the rain. In a media event, they asked us if we could drift a Taycan, and that's red to a bull when a driver is asked by the media if they can drift the car, especially when it's not yours and you don't have to pay the tire bill. So I fell in love with the car. In seriousness, I fell in love with the car that weekend. Not only driving it hard and fast, but actually just cruising around. David Donahue was my co-driver every day back and forth from the hotel. And I remember one time it was dark by the time we left the track. It had been a long day, and we were cruising this car back and just enjoying the sound system and the beautiful interior. And I just looked over at him and I'm like, so this is what the future looks like. I mean, it literally felt like we were in a movie, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, to be a racing driver and make a lot of noise on the weekends, but kind of be part of the new age on the daily drive is fun.
Oh wow! Of course, your kids, they'll think this is much more cool, Dad, to get an electric, futuristic car as well. We had Alex Ross on the show from Sharkworks a couple of months ago, and he was saying that he commutes to work in a Tesla Model 3. And then drives the other stuff on the weekends and stuff like that. And he said the same thing as you, Pat. It's the commuting in places like Los Angeles. It's stop start all the time. But I have to say, I'd rather be where Jörg is, where he can go in the autobahn in his company car. Kat, do you have one more for the guys?
No, to be honest, that was going to be it. Apart from asking more about the Taycan, and it's interesting because obviously being a racing driver and a petrol head and working for Porsche, I didn't know what to expect of the Taycan, and I've been really surprised at how exciting it is. I'm surprised it's got character, it's got a soul. I just always assumed electric cars wouldn't have that. So for people that love cars and driving, I think Porsche have done an amazing job to achieve that. And it's great hearing from you guys, really jumping on board with that and getting excited about it. It just kind of highlights how good a car it is, really.
Yeah, I was similar to you, Kat. And I think that just like when the Panamera came around, a big sort of luxury sedan, I had my questions, but I've learned not to doubt the engineers in Weissach. And I think, Jörg, you could probably speak to this better, but how much about weight and how they place weight and countersink the passengers in the car and getting everything in that kind of racing mentality and that racing spirit. It's unbelievable what you can do with a Cayenne, loaded full of family members and kids, and you go onto an on-ramp and somebody rolls up behind you in some type of modified streetcar from another manufacturer, and by the time you're straight and going onto the motorway, they're not even in sight anymore. So it's fun to have race inspired cars to drive on the street and still to do it with some aesthetic class.
Absolutely.
Yep. Not more
Fantastic. Well, Pat, Jörg, it's been an absolute privilege to chat to you and go through all of the career, and I'm sure we could have been here for a little bit longer, but it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much for joining us on the PorscheSport Podcast, and good luck with your respective races in the next weekend. Jörg, you'll see my pal Duncan, the pit lane reporter. He's from my local track, so I'll tell him to come and say hello to you.
Please do so.
Excellent.
Cool. Thanks
for having us.
The PorscheSport Podcast, powered by Porsche Center Leeds. Test drive the new Porsche Taycan and experience soul electrified. For more information, visit www.PorscheSport.com.